Have you ever driven through Goa and wondered how all this stuff gets built? From a tiny house to a massive resort? Well, there's a master plan behind it all, a single law that governs everything. Today, we're going to crack open that blueprint, the Goa Land Development and Building Construction Act. Let's decode it together. So, here's the game plan. We'll kick things off by looking at why this law even exists. Then we'll see who actually gets to write the rules. After that, we'll break down the different kinds of buildings and get into the really crucial stuff, the language of measurement. And finally, we'll wrap it all up and see why this blueprint is so important for everyone. All right, let's set the stage here. Before 2008, things were, well, they were a bit of a mess. The rules for building could change depending on which part of Goa you were in. As you can imagine, that created a ton of confusion. So the government decided to create one single unified set of regulations for the entire state, to get everyone on the same page. And this is it, the Goa Regulation of Land Development and Building Construction Act of 2008. Now, here's a fun fact. Even though it says 2008, it was actually brought into force in late 2007. This act became the absolute foundation, the bedrock for every detailed rule that followed. It basically said, okay, everyone, from this day forward, we're all playing by the same rule book. Okay, so having one big law is great, but the real magic is in the details, right? So who actually sits down and writes these super specific rules? And how do they do it? You might think it happens behind closed doors, but it's actually a surprisingly public process. Let's take a look. What's so cool about this is that it shows you the whole journey. It's not just some decree from on high. It all starts with a public notice. They put a draft out there, and you, me, anyone, gets 30 days to give feedback. Then a whole committee of pros, we're talking architects, engineers, they go through all that feedback. That report moves up the chain to a high-level steering committee, and only then does the government give it the final stamp of approval. It's a whole system built to include both public voices and expert opinion. All right, so one of the first things these regulations do is put buildings into different buckets based on what they're used for. And this is so important because the rules for your family home should be totally different from the rules for a movie theater, right? This category determines everything: safety, design, how much you can build. Let's look at a few of the big ones. First up, the one we all know best, a residential building. The definition is pretty much what you'd expect. It's where people live. This covers the whole spectrum, from a single-family home all the way to a big apartment building. If you can sleep, live, and cook there, it's residential. Simple as that. Next, we've got mercantile buildings. Just think commerce. This is any place that's used to sell stuff. We're talking about everything from your neighborhood corner shop to a giant supermarket or a wholesale depot. If things are being bought and sold, chances are you're in a mercantile building. And then there are assembly buildings. This one is all about people getting together in groups. Think about it. Movie theaters, auditoriums, places of worship, even bus stations. The key word here is congregate. And that's exactly why these buildings have a whole different and usually much stricter set of rules for things like fire exits and accessibility. Okay, deep breath. We're now diving into the most important part of this whole blueprint, the technical language. These are the core measurements that control exactly what you can build, where you can build it, and how big it can be. Getting your head around these terms is absolutely essential. Let's start with two basic but crucial ideas. First, you have the covered area. The best way to think about this is as the building's shadow on the ground. It's the footprint. Now, if you take that footprint and you stack it up for every single floor, ground, first, second, and so on, the grand total of all that space is your floor area. And that leads us to maybe the most powerful tool in the whole rulebook, the floor area ratio, or FAR. It's a simple calculation, but it dictates the total amount of construction you can have on your piece of land. A higher FAR means you can build more, which you might see in a busy city center. A lower FAR means less construction, preserving that open, spacious feel. It's basically the master control knob for a neighborhood's density and character. And this example, pulled straight from the regulations, shows you how it works in the real world. It's brilliant. Look, a plot lost some land because a road needed to be widened. So the law actually allows for extra FAR on the land that's left to make up for the loss. It's a really smart way to balance public projects with the rights of the property owner. So if FAR controls the total volume, how much you can build, what controls the spread? Well, that's coverage. It's simply the percentage of your plot that the building's footprint is allowed to cover. This is what ensures you have open space for things like light, air, and maybe a garden. It stops people from just building from one edge of their property to the other. Of course, it's not the Wild West. You can't just draw up these plans on a napkin. The law is crystal clear about who is qualified to do what. You need a registered architect for the architectural design, you need an engineer for the construction and structural side of things, and for the really big projects, like whole townships, you need a qualified town planner. It's all about ensuring professional standards are met. So, we've gone through all these definitions, all these procedures, but what's the bottom line? Why does any of this legal stuff actually matter to you or me? Let's boil it all down to the most important takeaways. So here it is. Number 1, it creates consistency. Everyone plays by the same rules. 2, it's a public process. These rules aren't just made up in secret. 3, it gives us real tools, like FAR and coverage to control how our towns and villages grow. But the last one is the most important. This knowledge is power. It empowers you. It lets you look at a development plan for your own neighborhood and actually understand what it means. It gives you a voice. And that really brings us to the final big question. This act, this blueprint, it's not just a dusty old document. It's the tool we have to shape the future of Goa for the next 10, 20, even 50 years. So now that you understand the basic rules of the game, the question I want to leave you with is this. How can we use this blueprint to build a Goa that's not just bigger, but better? A Goa that's truly sustainable for generations to come?